I could go ahead and tell you right away that this one's probably not going to be worth your time. The Scientist. There is no cure for the undead. This film was released by ITN here, which is barely a notch above what Echo Bridge spews out. At least Echo Bridge spews out some stuff that used to be picked up by other companies, like big ones like, Bobby Z. That one was, I believe, Sony before Echo Bridge started releasing it, whatever. Anyways, this is an indie film. Like completely indie film. The misleading cover here isn't as misleading as others, but it tells you what it needs to tell you. It's got a little zombie hand here, it's got white eyes here, you got a little doctor's mask here signifying, oh, this could be a scientist, and we have some scientist tools here. It's harmless, but it is misleading to a degree, making you think, oh, it's only a bright film. It's not exactly. I couldn't afford too many of those. Now let's see, it was made, I believe, by these guys right here, Stellar Pictures. Wow, that's really small, it's right there. It's made by Stellar Pictures here, and directed by a man named Derek Granado, written and directed by him. Now, the characters in this are uninteresting. Almost all of them are uninteresting. It revolves around a scientist man who is trying to find cures for various things. He marries a woman that he's deeply in love with, but this woman ends up being diagnosed with an incurable disease, and he wants to come up with a cure, and he might actually have found said cure, but his handlers, his big doctor handlers, say, don't do that. If you cure it, we won't be able to treat it. And it does have this little political ramifications of the medical industry strewn into the movie. There's a whole segment where the big shot Dr. Man talks to our Dr. Man and basically lectures him on why we don't make cures, we make treatments. And the big Dr. Man says to the smaller Dr. Man that if we created cures, for example, the chicken pox, then nobody would get the chicken pox anymore, which means we wouldn't be able to treat anybody with the chicken pox, which means we wouldn't be able to make money off the chicken pox, which basically says that this big shot Dr. Man talking to our Dr. Man is basically explaining that the medical industry is a business, and that they treat illnesses as business, not in the means of curing anything. They just want to stall it. They want to treat it so that you can keep coming back, they keep making money, they keep getting funding and all that stuff. Because if everything was cured, if everything was fixed, if there are no problems in the world, then scientists, doctor people who work with medicines and stuff become irrelevant. That's what the whole scene was all about. That's basically what I got from there. It got really political in the middle there, and they just held on that whole debacle. So our lower Dr. Man decides, screw the big Dr. Man, I'm going to make a cure for my wife's illness anyways. He's normally the guy who comes up with like cosmetic faces for rich people, extremely rich people who can afford these cosmetic facelifts and all that stuff. So he's the guy who works on that, and he decides that that doesn't actually help people in the long run. They're just expensive treatments for rich people who can afford it for their vanities. So he decides he's going to come up with a cure for his wife's illness. And as his wife progressively ails more and more, and his research is dwindling because, he doesn't have government funding. He's doing this all in secret. So he's starting to get very desperate. He's starting to get very morally gray. And then he starts leaning closer and closer to morally black, morally dark, morally evil. Because there is nothing that he wouldn't do to save his wife. And he's starting to become distant to his daughter. He's starting to become rude to his co-workers. He's starting to become distant to his friend. He's starting to become distant to his maid, nanny person that he hired, a hospice nurse, I'm guessing, to look after the wife while he's out being a Dr. Man. So eventually he comes up with some sort of serum that he thinks will bring back the dead. Basically a cure for death. But what he ends up doing is he basically brings the dead back to life as zombies. So basically he causes a zombie outbreak. And the zombies are very, very, very minimal. It's at the very, very end of the film. You see a couple of them throughout the second act. Yeah, you see one or two throughout the second act. But all they have are these white eyes. Otherwise, they're completely fine. They're not decomposing. Because, of course, they couldn't afford makeup for that, I guess. They couldn't afford that. It's very indie. It's very, very, very indie. But I get the story that they were trying to do here. I get what they were trying to do here. They just didn't stick the landing in regards to movie here. This could have made a great book. This could have made a great book that the writer here clearly feels impassioned about this story. He could have just made this into a book because he didn't have the budget to get decent actors. Like, I'm not gonna shit on these guys. I'm not gonna do it. But they're not big star actors, and they're not gripping. At least to me, they're not gripping to me and like keeping my attention. The words that they're speaking are hard to pay attention to. And that's the difference between strong character actors and strong scripts versus weak character actors. Here's an example of a fantastic character actor performance here. There are a lot of scenes where Jake Gyllenhaal's character has long talking moments. There's a lot of things that he says, and there's a lot of stuff that he does, and all of his actions and all of his movements grip you, and they keep your attention because there is a level of competency in the way that he does his character actor stuff. It makes you interested in the character. It makes you want to listen to what the character has to say. In this, the only one close enough to being a character actor or whatever, the scientist, is named after the main character, and even he is not charismatic enough to keep my attention. Sometimes I would have to like rewind the video to re-listen to what he said because I just kept zoning out. This film is 94 minutes long. It felt like 134 minutes long. When a film feels longer than it actually is, that's not helping the film. Especially if you aren't that interested in the characters. I'm interested in the plot. I'm interested in the idea of a doctor driven over the edge to madness trying to save the person that he loves and starts going into very morally dark areas to do what he feels is right, making more and more morally dark sacrifices, both to himself and his sanity and to the people around him, in order to make advances in science that he believes will help everybody in the long run. But he drives himself over the edge and becomes the villain of the story. He is the protagonist and the antagonist at the exact same time. He is his own worst enemy, and it ends up killing him. You see, that the synopsis is sound. The story is sound. When you watch this film, it's not sound. It's not that interesting. And I lost interest in the first act, in the first 5 minutes. I had to keep going. I kept going, and I kept going and watching through it, and I had to keep going to pauses to take breaks because I just couldn't keep attention. The Scientist may not be worth your time, even if you find it for $1. Be more imaginative than this. You could just turn this into a book.